Hello, and welcome back to the deep dive. We are wading into some pretty murky waters today. We're looking at this fascinating clash between two fundamental human desires that, well, they really don't get along very well.
No, they really don't.
Right. So on one hand, you have this deep desire to be left alone, to, keep your dignity, your secrets, your embarrassing moments entirely private.
The whole stay out of my business impulse.
Exactly. But then on the other hand, you have the hustle. The desire to make money, to compete, to steal clients, to win at capitalism, and, frankly, to call out bad products when you see them.
And the law basically has this impossible job of acting as the referee between those two completely different worlds. It has to decide, when does speaking your mind become a lawsuit?
Okay.
And when does aggressive marketing just cross the line into illegal interference?
And to figure this out, we're looking at a stack of materials today that come from a pretty intense place. It's a masterclass legal framework designed specifically for the multi-state bar examination.
The MBE.
The MBE, yeah. So our mission today, we aren't just looking at news articles or opinion pieces. We are diving into the actual mechanical logic that lawyers have to use to pass the bar.
Which is what makes this so cool. This is really the under-the-hood view. What's fascinating about the source material is that it completely strips away the drama.
Yeah.
It's just impartial logic. It looks for the mechanics of a dispute and basically treats human conflict like a flowchart.
And that flowchart starts with what the sources call the first exam move. It says before you even look at what someone did, before you look at the tweet or the hidden camera or the broken contract, you have to categorize the interest that was harmed.
Right, it's the triage phase. You have to ask, what actually got hurt here? Because if it's your feelings or your dignity or your solitude, then you are in the world of privacy torts.
Right.
But if it's your reputation, meaning what other people think of you, that's defamation.
Which is a totally different bucket. I mean, we've touched on defamation before in other deep dives, but today is really about things that are adjacent to it, but legally distinct.
Completely different rules apply. And then finally, if the harm is to your wallet, your contracts, your business deals, then you're looking at economic interference or injurious falsehood.
So dignity, reputation, or money. That is our roadmap for today. And let's just jump right into the first one, because I think this is where people have the most misconceptions. The privacy bucket.
The four, as they're known in the legal world.
The big four. Right, because I think most people assume invasion of privacy is just this one big generic lawsuit. Like, you annoyed me, you got in my space, so I'm suing you.
Yeah, people throw that term around a lot.
They do.
Right.
But the sources are incredibly clear here. You have to pick a specific flavor of privacy invasion.
You absolutely do. You can't just wave your hands in front of a judge and say privacy. You have to fit the facts of your situation into one of four very specific boxes. And the first one is basically your classic spy movie scenario. It's called intrusion upon seclusion.
I like to call this one the creepy neighbor tort.
That is exactly what it is. It's the invasive act. We're talking about wiretapping a phone or hacking into private emails or peeping through a bedroom window. But here's the key insight that apparently trips up law students all the time. For this specific tort, publication is completely irrelevant.
Okay, this was the part that genuinely surprised me. So let me make sure I've got this. Let's say I set up a hidden camera in someone's hotel room.
Okay.
I record them. But then, I don't know, I feel terrible about it. I never show the video to anyone. I just delete it.
Yeah.
Am I still on the hook for a lawsuit?
You are. You are liable the exact moment that camera is placed and turned on. The tort isn't about spreading the secret. The tort is the intrusion itself. You violated their zone of privacy. Whether anyone else ever sees the footage just doesn't matter. The harm is the act of crossing that boundary.
That zone of privacy concept seems a bit tricky, though. The materials we're looking at compare a celebrity walking on a sidewalk to someone sitting in their bedroom.
Yeah, it all comes down to reasonable expectation. If you are a celebrity, let's just say Brad Pitt, and you're walking down Fifth Avenue, you have zero reasonable expectation of seclusion.
Because you're out in the open.
Right. People can take your picture. You are in public. The law basically says if you put yourself out there, you cannot complain when people look at you.
But,
and here's the twist, if a photographer stands on that exact same public sidewalk, but uses a high-powered telephoto lens to zoom all the way through Brad Pitt's second-story bedroom window.
And that is intrusion.
Precisely. Because the location of the photographer is irrelevant. It's the location of the victim that determines the liability. You have a right to be left alone in your home, even if the person looking in happens to be standing in a public park.
Because they're using technology to bypass those physical barriers.
Exactly. They are bypassing the walls we put up to protect our dignity.
Okay, so that's intrusion. That's all about the act of spying itself. Let's move to number 2, which honestly feels less about spying and more about, like, theft, appropriation of name or likeness.
Ah, yes, the don't use my face to sell your stuff tort.
The example in the source notes was really great for this. Imagine a local gym. They just go online, find a picture of a famous athlete, say LeBron James, working out.
Right.
They slap it on a flyer that says, "Come train like the king," and they distribute it all over town to sell memberships.
And let's assume LeBron never signed a contract with this random local gym. That is textbook appropriation. The gym is using his identity, his likeness, to gain a commercial advantage. They are monetizing his reputation without paying him for it.
But wait, news organizations use photos of people all the time without paying them. If the New York Times puts LeBron on the front page after a big game, isn't that using his likeness to sell papers?
It is, but the law carves out a massive exception for newsworthiness. If it's news, if it's art, if it's commentary, it is generally protected by the First Amendment. Appropriation is really strictly about commercial exploitation.
So selling cereal, selling gym memberships, cars.
Exactly, selling products. Front page of the paper, fine. Son of a Wheaties box. You better have a signed contract. It's all about who gets to capture the commercial value of your identity.
Got it. Now, the third one on the privacy bucket. This is where things get really philosophically interesting and honestly kind of scary for a lot of people. Public disclosure of private facts.
This is definitely the one that challenges people's intuition the most.
It kept me up reading last night.
Yeah.
Because unlike defamation, where you are suing someone for lying about you here, you are literally suing them for telling the truth.
And that is the hardest hurdle for people to wrap their heads around. We all grow up thinking truth is the ultimate defense. If I call you a tax cheat and you actually are a tax cheat, you cannot sue me for defamation. But with public disclosure of private facts, the truth is actually the weapon being used against you.
So walk us through the elements here. When is telling the truth actually illegal?
It has to be highly sensitive, private information. We aren't talking about something minor like, oh, you look goofy at the party last night. We are talking about deep secrets, medical records, sexual history, extreme private financial insolvency.
Things that a reasonable person would find highly offensive to have broadcasted to the world.
Exactly. The source gave a great example. Imagine a coworker somehow finds out you have a rare, very embarrassing disease, and they decide to blast that out in an email to the entire office.
Which is true. You really do have the disease.
It's true, but it is nobody's business. The harm there isn't that people think you're a liar. The harm is the profound humiliation. It is a violation of your basic right to keep certain vulnerable aspects of your life behind closed doors.
But there's a catch, right?
There's a massive catch, a trapdoor, really. The newsworthiness defense.
Right, the public concern argument.
Yes. If the information is deemed to be of legitimate public concern, the courts will almost always side with free speech over your privacy.
So if a private citizen, just a regular guy, has a heart attack, that is deeply private. But if the President of the United States has a heart attack,
that is front page news. The public has a fundamental right to know about the leader's health. The law is constantly balancing your right to privacy against the public's right to information. And usually if you are a public figure, your privacy loses.
it's a really tough trade-off because we want to know everything about public figures, but we desperately want to protect our own secrets.
Absolutely.
Okay, that brings us to the fourth privacy tort, false light. Now, to me, reading the materials, this felt remarkably similar to defamation. What is the actual distinction here?
It is a very, very thin line. False light is about publicizing a misleading portrayal that is highly offensive. But unlike defamation, which is laser-focused on damaging your reputation in the community, like, will people stop doing business with you? False light is really about your own emotional distress. It's the distress of being misrepresented to the world.
I think the example in the masterclass makes this a lot clearer. The stock photo disaster.
Oh, yeah. That's a classic bar exam scenario. Imagine a local newspaper is writing a big expose about the drug crisis in suburbia. And the layout editor needs a photo of a random house to illustrate the story. So they just grab a stock photo, and it happens to be your house.
Right. I'm not a drug dealer. My house has never been raided by the police. But there it is, right under the massive headline, "Heroin Den Raided."
Exactly. Now, the newspaper didn't explicitly write the words, "John Smith, who lives in this house, is a drug dealer." So it might be hard to win a strict defamation claim, but the association creates this false light. It implies something terrible about you.
And I can sue for the distress of that implication alone.
Yes, even if you can't prove that your neighbors actually stopped talking to you or that you lost your job, you can sue for the emotional damage of being cast in that false, highly offensive light.
It's just the sheer embarrassment of the association.
Right. It's about not being used as a prop for a negative story that has absolutely nothing to do with you.
Now, before we move off the privacy bucket entirely, there was this vocabulary term that just kept popping up in the reading. And we've actually been using these words interchangeably today: publication and publicity. In normal, everyday conversation, those are basically synonyms?
They are, but in the law, they are totally different universes. And this is a massive vocabulary trap, not just for the bar exam, but for real life.
Break it down for us. What's the difference?
Okay, so publication, in the legal sense, specifically when we're talking about defamation, is a term of art. It simply means communicating information to at least one third party. That's it. If I lean over and whisper a vicious lie about you to just one person, I have legally published that lie.
Just one person. That is an incredibly low bar.
It is very low because, honestly, it only takes one person to start a rumor that ruins a reputation. But, and this is the crucial difference for the privacy torts we just discussed, specifically public disclosure of private facts and false light, the requirement is not publication. The requirement is publicity.
And publicity implies a crowd.
Exactly. It implies broad dissemination. You have to communicate the information to the public at large, or at least to so many people, that it is substantially certain to become public knowledge.
So let's apply this to the real world so it makes sense. If I tell my absolute best friend a really juicy, embarrassing, but true secret about a coworker.
That is publication, yes, because you told one person. But it is not publicity. You likely cannot be sued for public disclosure of private facts, because it's just gossip. The law generally does not want to get into the business of policing whispers between friends.
But if I take that exact same secret and post it on my Twitter feed where I have 500 followers...
Now you have publicity. You have officially crossed the line from harmless gossip to tort liability. You've made that private fact public property.
That is a terrifying distinction for the social media age. Literally, the difference between a whisper to a friend and a tweet is a massive lawsuit.
It really is. It highlights just how much the law struggles to keep up with modern technology. I mean, when every single person has a global broadcast tower in their pocket, the line between a private conversation and publicity gets very, very blurry. But the underlying legal standard remains exactly the same. Broad dissemination matters.
All right, let's pivot. We spent a lot of time on dignity and feelings and keeping secrets. Now I want to talk about the sharp end of the stick, the economic torts. This is where we stop worrying about personal feelings and we start worrying about the bottom line.
We are officially entering the marketplace now, and this is where business gets brutal. The law here isn't trying to protect your emotions anymore. It is solely trying to protect your contracts and your revenue streams.
The sources break this down under the umbrella of interference. And it seems like the single most important variable here, like the main pivot point, is whether the ink is already dry on a contract.
That is the ultimate question. Do you have a signed binding deal, or are you just flirting with the prospect?
Let's start with the signed deal. Scenario A, interference with an existing contract.
This is the absolute strongest claim you can make in this arena. To win this, you basically need three things. First, a valid contract has to exist. Second, the defendant had to actually know about it. And third, the defendant had to intentionally blow it up.
When you say blow it up, you mean they induced a breach.
Right. So imagine you have a rock-solid supplier contract to buy widgets for $10 a piece. I am your biggest competitor. I find out about that deal. I go directly to your supplier and say, hey, forget them. Break that contract. I will pay you $15 a piece, and I'll even cover your legal fees if they try to sue you.
I mean, that is aggressive.
That's illegal. That is tortious interference because I am actively destroying a bound legal relationship. The law deeply respects the sanctity of a signed contract. If I do that, you can sue me for the damages you suffered because I didn't just compete with you in the free market. I actively sabotaged a binding agreement.
Okay, makes sense. But let's rewind the tape. What if the contract isn't signed yet? What if we are just in the middle of heavy negotiations? This brings us to scenario B, interference with prospective economic advantage.
The word perspective there changes everything. If the ink isn't dry, you don't actually have a legal right to that deal yet. You just have a hope. You have a reasonable expectancy that it's going to close.
And because it's just a hope, the law lets competitors play rougher.
Much rougher. This is where we see what's called the pure competition defense. Look, the American legal system fundamentally loves capitalism. It wants businesses to fight tooth and nail for customers because that lowers prices and improves quality.
So go back to that supplier example. We are negotiating. I am right about to sign the paperwork. You swoop in at the very last second and say to the supplier, I can do it cheaper, I can do it faster, and I can do it better. And they dump me, and they sign with you.
That is perfectly legal. You lost the deal, you lost the potential money, but I did absolutely nothing wrong. I was just being a better competitor.
Even though you knew I was right in the middle of negotiating.
Even then, for you to actually sue me in this prospective phase where there's no contract, I have to do significantly more than just compete. I have to use what the law calls wrongful means.
Okay, define wrongful means. Were we just talking about being mean or unfair?
No, we are talking about being straight up criminal or tortious. We're talking about fraud, extortion, threats, violence, bribery.
Okay, so let me make sure I've got this straight. I offer a better price is pure competition, but I threaten to burn down your warehouse if you sign with them. That is wrongful means.
Exactly. Or let's say I tell the supplier, don't sign with them, they're completely bankrupt, when I know for an absolute fact that you are financially healthy. That's fraud. That's wrongful. The law draws a very strict line around dirty tricks, but as long as you stay inside that line, it is a free-for-all.
It's really interesting how the standard shifts so dramatically. If I have a signed contract, I am protected from almost everything. If I don't, I'm really only protected from actual criminals.
That's a great way to put it. The contract acts like a magic shield. Without it, you are out in the wild west of the free market.
Speaking of lying about businesses, this leads us perfectly to the final piece of the puzzle. The tort with honestly the most intimidating name, injurious falsehood.
Also commonly known as trade libel.
So how is this actually different from regular defamation? I mean, if I go online and say a local restaurant is terrible, isn't that just defaming the owner?
It depends entirely on the specific target of your sentence. If you say, the owner of this bistro is a tax-evading criminal, you are attacking the person. That is defamation.
Okay.
But if you say, this bistro serves contaminated rat meat in their stew, you are attacking the product. You are attacking the business itself. That is trade libel.
So chef is a crook versus burger is poison.
You got it. And here is the kicker. The source material emphasizes this heavily because it is a massive trap on the bar exam. Trade libel is incredibly hard to win in court because of a requirement called special damages.
We've seen the term damages before, obviously, but special damages sounds very specific.
It is brutally specific. In a personal defamation case, if I call you a criminal publicly, the court will often just presume that you were hurt. They assume your reputation took a major hit. You don't always need to show a precise dollar amount to win.
But for trade libel?
For trade libel, damages are never presumed. Never. You must prove actual, concrete, pecuniary loss.
So I can't just go to the judge and say, hey, my business really slowed down after that fake rat meat review got posted.
Absolutely not. You literally need receipts. You need to be able to stand there and say, I had exactly 10 catering orders scheduled for Tuesday. After this lie was published, 8 of those clients called and canceled explicitly citing the rat meat rumor, and that cost my business exactly $4,500.
Wow, so you have to be able to trace the actual dollar directly back to the specific lie.
Yes. A general slump in sales usually isn't enough to cut it. You have to connect the dots. And that is exactly why you don't see successful trade libel cases every single day. The burden of proof on the plaintiff is huge.
It really seems like the law puts this massive protective bubble around business talk. It gives you a ton of leeway to compete aggressively, to criticize products, to try to steal clients, right up until the moment you start committing outright fraud or causing, like, highly provable financial ruin.
I think that's a very fair assessment. The law treats personal human dignity as something fragile, like that bedroom window we talked about earlier, but it assumes the marketplace has incredibly thick skin. It expects businesses to be able to take a punch unless that punch involves broken glass or blatant destructive lies.
So if we zoom out and look at this entire masterclass framework from the MBE, We basically have a complete decision tree for modern human conflict.
It really is a workflow.
Yeah.
If you feel wronged by someone, or even if you're just worried about something you're about to post online, you can run the algorithm.
Step 1, identify the interest. Is the harm to dignity and privacy? Is it reputation? Or is it money and business?
Right. Then step 2, check the mechanics of that specific lane. If it's privacy, are we talking about the sheer act of intrusion where no publication is needed at all? Or are we talking about the spread of secrets, where you absolutely need publicity?
And if it's business, is there a signed contract? Because if yes, do not touch it. If no, compete away. Just don't use wrongful means like fraud or threats.
And if you're criticizing a product, just make sure you aren't lying. Because if that business can prove you cost them specific dollars, you are stepping right into the realm of trade libel.
It's kind of ironic, isn't it? We all act like the internet is this totally lawless frontier where anything goes. But actually, there are these very old, very rigid logical structures underneath it all. We just don't usually see them until the subpoena arrives in the mail.
That's the thing. The laws of 19th century English common law are still governing your 21st century Twitter feud. The tools change, the technology changes, but the core categories, dignity, reputation, money, they stay exactly the same.
It definitely makes you think twice about that angry one-star review you're about to leave, or that, funny photo you're about to share with your followers. Where does telling a friend end and publicity begin? And when does a bad Yelp review cross the line from just being your opinion into actual interference?
A little legal literacy goes a very long way.
It really does. Well, that is our deep dive for today. Hopefully, we've given you the tools to protect your dignity and your wallet out there in the marketplace. Thanks for listening.
Take care, everyone.